All right, I want to talk about assistant coaches, and specifically, I want to talk about Frank Wilson. We're looking at what Lane Kiffin's staff is likely to look like at LSU. And a lot of this is not official, but we've got enough information to know this is where things are headed. And so on the defensive side of the ball, Blake Baker's coming back. And we feel confident in suggesting that Jake Olson and Kevin Peoples, who are his guys, are going to come coach the safety, are going to remain to coach the safeties and coach the edge rushers. And you feel like Corey Raymond is certainly back coaching the corners. Now, defensive line coach, there may be a shakeup. I don't expect Kyle Williams back. So you've still got to look at defensive line. But the defense is kind of set up. And then you look on the offensive side, and Kiffin's going to be in charge of that, and Charlie Weiss Jr. will be there as well. And you've got Joe Cox, who is here with the tight ends, and George McDonald, who is here with the wide receivers, and then Dane Stevens is going to coach the quarterbacks. And you've kind of got where that's going to be set up, and you don't feel like Brad Davis will be back on the offensive line, so you're going to have to handle that situation. You feel like you've got that in Wolford from Kentucky. So that leaves running backs. Running backs and defensive line, basically. Not officially, but basically. And there are a lot of differing opinions on Frank Wilson and whether or not you'd like him back at LSU next year. This is my take on it. LSU recruited New Orleans before Frank Wilson was on staff. LSU has recruited New Orleans with Frank Wilson on staff. LSU will recruit New Orleans, well, without Frank Wilson on staff. Whenever that time comes. It might come in 3 weeks. It might come in 7 years. I don't know. I know that, and everyone knows that. Frank Wilson's not the only reason that LSU can go get good players out of New Orleans. But I do know this. I know that Frank Wilson has deep, deep, deep ties to that city. Everybody knows Coach Frank. I know that he's recruited that city exceptionally well while he's been at LSU. Has he gotten every player out of New Orleans? No. Recruiting is not a 100% game. It's not a zero-sum game. It's hits and misses. But it would be inarguable to suggest that Frank Wilson doesn't give you good access to New Orleans and great relationships to New Orleans. It's also inarguable that New Orleans is the most important city to this football program. You can try to suggest something else. You could try to tell me the Baton Rouge area has pumped out great players, and it has. You could try to tell me that LSU has made hay in Acadiana, and you could. And you could try to tell me that North Louisiana produces some really good players, but nothing is on the level of New Orleans. You can run down the list. It goes on and on and on and on. Leonard Fournette. I'm not even going to go down the list. It's Jamar Chase. It's Justin Jefferson. It's a ridiculous list. Tyrann Mathieu. But Frank Wilson has made a career, a role out of that city. And I think there's a chance that if you let Frank Wilson go and you bring in Kevin Smith, who we'll talk about the term sheet, like there's reportedly a term sheet that he signed to stay at Ole Miss. I don't know the legality of that, and I'm not 100% sure on that. So I'm going to play the speculation game like maybe it's him, maybe it's Frank Wilson, maybe it's somebody else. But there's a chance that if you go get Kevin Smith to be your running backs coach, that he doesn't recruit that city as well. That he doesn't have those relationships, and that you do let some guys slip through the cracks. I would suggest that chance is higher if you move on from Frank Wilson and go get Kevin Smith. Now, I also have reason to believe that Lane Kiffin has worked with Kevin Smith for a decade and that he's been a trusted recruiter and he's coached running backs. And if Lane Kiffin hires Kevin Smith, I will understand that. I will disagree with it, but I will understand that. But you saw what happened with Corey Raymond 4 years ago. And there were a lot of people in this fan base that went, you know, this guy's not recruiting the same level. We're not as good on the defensive backfield. Like, it's time for a fresh face. Like, move him along. Huh? That's not great. The proof is so much in the pudding. Your defensive back play fell off a cliff, and you had to bring him back to patch that up, and he immediately elevated it to the National True Freshman of the Year by On 3 and DJ Pickett, and a Thorpe finalist and the best cover corner in the country in Mansour Delane. It took that long. Do you want to run the risk that the same thing could happen in New Orleans. I'm not telling you it will. I just don't want to mess with it. And if you do decide to move on from Frank Wilson and go get Kevin Smith or someone else, and either Ole Miss or Texas hires him as the running backs coach, hypothetically, as Pete Nichols at On 3 reported yesterday, Frank Wilson's on their list at running backs coach. Do you want Texas's war chest and that brand and all that money on Frank Wilson's chest going into that city while you're trying to recruit it with a new guy in Kevin Smith and a new guy in Lane Kiffin? Do you want to try that? I'm not telling you that it won't work out for LSU, but I'm not really interested in trying it that much. I know Mike Wallace left O.P. Walker and went to play for Frank at Ole Miss and became an NFL star. I know when Frank was on staff for like 10 minutes at Tennessee, he got Anthony Johnson to commit, and never mind what Anthony Johnson did at LSU or didn't and what he didn't do in the NFL. When he was a recruit, he was as big a recruit as there was in the country. And Frank Wilson had him pack his bags for Knoxville before Lane left for USC. And Jarvis Landry was next. I just don't want to mess with that. I don't want to mess with New Orleans. And you could point to Jakeem Stewart and say he got out, and you can point to Aaron Anderson and say he got out. And again, Frank doesn't get them all. But I think he gives you a real good chance to go in there and get the talent that's on hand. I think he helped a lot with Richard Anderson this year and Aiden Hall this year. And there are more coming down the pike. And you may say, well, he's awful at coaching running backs. Okay. Fournette seemed to run okay. Guice seemed to run okay. Jeremy Hill ran okay. They were NFL backs. They had great offensive lines. I would submit Leonard Fournette would not have been any good running behind that offensive line the last 2 years. It's my guess. I can't prove it. It's my guess. I listen to Jacob Hester sit here all the time and say you can't teach running the ball. You can either run the ball or you can't. That's a guy who was a stud at LSU and played in the NFL forever. Like, I'll take his word for it. I don't think Frank doesn't know how to coach pass protection. I don't think Frank has lost the ability to teach guys to create positive yardage on the ground. I think LSU's scheme and offensive line stunk the last 2 years in run blocking, and that's why I don't think they've run the ball very well. I don't think it's because the position coach doesn't know what he's doing. You want to quibble with who gets the carries? I'll listen to that. I will listen to that. But I'm also here to tell you that whoever LSU's running back coach is under Lane Kiffin and his offense and the space it creates and the tempo it creates and what they've done on the ground with just about everybody that's rolled through there, like, I think the running backs are going to find some places to run under Lane Kiffin. I don't think it's the running backs coach's job to make sure the running back runs for 1,000 yards. That's my opinion. And I just don't want to rock the boat in New Orleans unnecessarily. So here's kind of where I stand on it in a big picture. If Lane Kiffin thinks that Kevin Smith is the best running back coach in the country, is a great recruiter and a guy that understands his scheme and offense and can come in and run his system well, and that's the guy he wants to do it, I will understand that. Kevin Smith has clearly done a very good job for Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. I will understand that. I will disagree with it, but I will fully understand it. If Kevin Smith stays at Ole Miss and LSU moves on for some other running backs coach at LSU, I will say that's a mistake. I said it was a mistake to walk away from Corey Raymond. It will be a mistake to watch Frank Wilson walk out that door. That's my opinion. And I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know if Kevin Smith's term sheet is binding, and I don't know what kind of relationship Lane Kiffin and Frank Wilson have today as opposed to what they had in 2009 at Tennessee, and I don't know everything that happened last week in football ops with all the recruiting stuff and the conversations. I don't know. Rumors swirl, things are said, whatever. But I know right now that we don't have a public declaration as to what the future is for Frank Wilson on Lane Kiffin's staff or not. And I'm just tossing my chip in the ring. I'm giving you my opinion on this situation. That man and that city, I just would not mess with at that spot on the staff. I think that the recruiting aspect of what he can bring is more significant than purely looking at the stat sheet and going, well, LSU sure didn't run it very well this past 2 years. That to me is insignificant when you bring in a new coach, a new scheme, and I think you're going to open things up. I would not rock that boat in New Orleans. There are some things you can do your own way when you come to LSU and you're a head coach. Rocking the boat in New Orleans is just not one I'm willing to get on board with. That's where I'm at on that one. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.